I think, my line of questioning before lunch, so I'm going to go to some new topics. Um, you talked on direct about sort of the routine that the Brophies would have in the morning.
Hmm.
Did you also get up early and experience what they were going through, or was this because they told you what the routine was?
Well, it was some of both.
Okay.
There were mornings that I was up, and I would generally go to the office. Upstairs there were the two rooms. There was the bedroom, and directly across from there was the office. And so many times I was in the office working, starting to work on either finishing up some policies that we were submitting, or getting the paperwork ready to go out in the field, or to go out and work. So both witness and discussed it.
Okay. And would, just in general, I'm not saying this was happening every day, but would Nancy stay in bed and write from there, or would she come into the office and write?
No, she stayed in bed and wrote.
Okay. And so when you talked about the routine on direct, you said that Dan would bring her coffee up to where she'd be in bed
Hmm.
and she'd be writing and she'd have her coffee.
Yes.
And this wasn't coffee that Dan just went downstairs and made. He would actually like go to Starbucks.
Many mornings he went into Starbucks.
Okay. Um, and so Nancy wasn't the one that would get up and go drive to Starbucks, bring coffee back, and get back into bed.
That was second coffee.
Second coffee.
That was second
Okay.
coffee.
First coffee,
Was Dan.
Dan
Yeah.
supplied.
Uh-huh.
And then second coffee. What time are we talking? Second coffee. What time does that roll around?
Oh gosh, I don't remember there being a specific time frame on that. I mean, it was just generally um, when she wanted coffee. It, I don't remember. There was not a set. The only set time frame was really more of Dan, because he would get up so early and go to work, so there was a limited time. But as far as second coffee, that varied.
Okay. And in your experience with Dan, what time did he generally go to work?
Well, I don't know about the Saturday, because that was something new. He had been working during the week, but then he had transitioned to a Saturday morning, and so I'm not sure specifically to that. But before, I think he would go to work. I want to say, I mean, it was super early. Maybe he would be leaving as early as, I see, and I can't remember. I don't remember if it was up at 5:30 or what, but I think around 5:30. I mean, he was up very early.
Got up around 5:30.
I think
Okay.
so.
But when he
Um,
was working on the weekends, you didn't really know
I,
if he
I
slept
can't
later or not.
speak to that. Well, no,
Okay.
no, I wasn't there. I had ceased living there at the point that he had transitioned into working on the Saturday, doing the Saturday morning class.
Okay. Um, the days that you were there and would experience sort of Dan's routine, so he would get up. Would coffee sort of be like the first thing?
I'm not sure. I know that he walked the dogs in the morning as well, and probably fed the chickens, did stuff like that, puttered around the kitchen. I'm couldn't tell you as far as a routine, as far as what order things
Sure.
happened, because I was, like I said, when the mornings that I was up working in the kitchen. I mean, in the kitchen. I'm sorry, I was up working in the office.
Okay.
Hmm.
And the second coffee that you talked
Hmm.
about, is that, I know you can't give us a time, but would Dan generally be gone by that point?
Yes,
Like he had gone to work or
yes,
whatever. Okay. And then so it'd be up to Nancy if she wanted more coffee from Starbucks or wherever, she would have to go get it.
yeah. We generally went together.
Okay. So I told you I had some new topics to talk about, but there was one thing I wanted to circle back on
Okay.
just real briefly. You had talked about, real briefly, you talked about Dan kind of slowing down sort of physically, kind of getting worn down, and that he was watching more sports in particular. Did you, the reason you said that, was that because Nancy told you that's what was going on with Dan, or is that something you were experiencing?
Well, it's something that there was some discussion, but also it was something that I witnessed. For example, the garden had gotten away from him. When I was there in 2011, the blackberry bushes, there were blackberry bushes, but they were kept at bay, because the garden was more in use. Um, over the next several years, whenever I was there, that by the time 2018, the blackberry bushes had taken over the backyard,
Right.
fully taken over. There was very little garden space at that point, and so that was an example. And that's really where I saw it the most was how the garden was going.
I'm going to take you back to that recorded interview that you did with Detective Merrill over the phone.
Hmm.
Do you recall telling him that Nancy had told you about the garden getting out of hand? First, I'll ask you that first.
Yes, like I said just a moment ago, it was both discussion and that I witnessed it. We had talked about it, and I also saw it with my own eyes. And I was in the garden quite a bit. Like I said, I liked the figs, and so I would sneak into the garden. Not that it wasn't allowed, but I would go into the garden daily
Sure. And
each time that I
I'm
was
trying to
there.
focus on just what you had told Detective Merrill.
Yes, and okay.
And so do you recall telling Detective Merrill too that Nancy had told you that Dan was watching a lot more sports these days?
Yes,
Okay.
I also witnessed it.
Okay. And I'm talking about the time sort of leading up to Dan's death, which you weren't really around then,
Well,
correct?
no, but I was there in 2011 and 2015, and I saw there was more sports being watched then, um, but I mean not obsessively so. It was just instead of going and working in the garden at night, he would go and sit down and watch some sports. It was just a difference in that that he was in the living in the den more.
And you had talked about Nancy sort of being a mother figure, at least back when you were a child.
Mhm.
But is it safe to say that you're probably closer to Nancy than any other family member?
Uh, would you clarify that some?
Do you think the relationship that you had with Nancy was one that was closer than you experienced Nancy to have with any other family member?
Oh, um, I don't know if closer. I think different. She was close with many family members. She spoke to many regularly, and I can't answer that. But I know that we were very close, and that she also had very close relationships with other family members. But many of them, I'm the only one who kept popping up and living with her. So
Do you recall back to that interview with Detective Merrill when he asked you the exact question that I just asked you and you responded yes?
no, I don't recall saying that, but. We do have a special relationship in that, but she also has close relationships with other family members.
You talked about this course that Nancy had taken at some the sheriff's office or
Hmm.
something, and she had shared some information about that with you.
Yes.
Do you recall you already talked about something about how mental illness was dealt with or mental health or something?
Hmm.
Did she talk about the other aspects of that course?
She did. That's what really stands out to me the most, though. Um, just I recall thinking that was something that was unusual and something that was probably helped with the recidivist. I'm not sure that I'm going to say this word right, but limiting how frequent people go back to jail. I think that.
Recidivism?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So
Hmm.
you said you started your answer with yes, she did share more things with you.
She did. I mean, she went every week, and every week she would come and she would talk about it. But I those are the things that stood out to me the most. I don't. I mean, I know that there was discussion about it, but
Do you
I,
remember her telling you? You just don't remember what they were.
yes,
So she didn't talk about how they taught her police tactics or anything like that.
no. Other than how they would handle the, like I said, the mentally ill, how they had a special unit, and outside of that, no, I don't recall.
Okay. You talked about age difference. Um, in general, age difference has an impact on one's ability to buy life insurance or
One's ability to qualify for insurance policies,
right.
yes,
Is that different between genders?
yes,
Like one.
I believe so. I, I believe so, but I can't recall. Yeah, it's been 10 years since I've really looked at that, but I believe so. Because but I can't remember what.
Well, let me
Go
ask you a
ahead.
specific question. Maybe that'll help. If assuming people are healthy, okay, assuming there's
Hmm.
no cancer or anything like
Hmm.
that running in for this person, for these people, if you have a male and a female the same age,
Hmm.
which policy would you expect to be less expensive?
I think the female.
Female.
Yeah.
And so if you had two people, and I'm not, this isn't, this is a hypothetical situation.
Yes.
If you had two 65-year-old people,
Hmm.
same amount of policy, assuming all things health related are
Hmm.
equal, you'd expect the female policy to be cheaper.
I believe so. That's what I recall, but
No, that's
like I
okay.
said, it's been a
And
long
this is,
time.
it's a hypothetical. I'm not
Yeah.
going to hold you to it. My next question regarding that, though, is isn't it true that Dan and Nancy were less than 4 years apart?
They were somewhere in that time frame, somewhere in that age difference.
So you talked a little bit about the policies that one might have. Um, and I just wanted to be clear from your perspective, was it your understanding, I'm sorry, let me restart that question. You talked about the policies getting more expensive as one gets older,
Hmm.
especially if you have to renew them,
Yes.
right? But there's some policies you don't have to renew at all, right? Like a universal whole life,
Well,
that's an ongoing policy.
yes, if it's, yeah, usually.
So you're more or less talking about term policies that end and you
Well,
have to,
or whole life policies. I mean, either one can be more, I mean, especially whole life policies are much more expensive
right?
than term policies.
They
But
get more expensive as you get older too.
yes, the insurance that you can buy at 20 is far cheaper than what you can buy whenever you're 50.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of different areas we can get into,
Yeah.
so let's try to. I want to
No,
keep it
no,
real
I am, and
focused.
that's what I think I'm answering your question. You said that is there a difference in cost in age, and that policies become more expensive as you get older, correct?
Part of the question, yes.
Okay.
So the the question being a universal policy. Once you get it,
Hmm.
it's your policy as long as you keep paying for it.
Yes. Now there are various different policies that you can get within the universal policies, but generally the ones that we sold, yes,
Okay. And a term life though, that has an end point,
yes,
right?
it's
10
usually
years,
yes.
15 years,
Hmm.
whatever. And so when you talk about policies getting more expensive too, is one of the things you're talking about these term policies where you get the policy to say when you're 50, you need a new one now, you're 60, it's going to be much more expensive than the one you bought when you were 50.
Yes.
Okay. And so are you aware that Dan actually had a term life policy that they had to renew when he was getting older and that he actually got a really low price for that? And it was very reasonable and they were able to keep it. Were you aware of that?
There should have been.
Meaning it didn't go up in price a lot.
No, okay. That they renewed a policy. Okay. Um, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, you said that one of the problems with life insurance, I don't
Hmm.
know if you said problem, but that when you have to renew these policies, that
Hmm.
they can get much more expensive, and so that's
Hmm.
a problem. That's why you have to look around and try to
Hmm.
find different
Yeah.
policies. So I was just asking if you're aware of one of Dan's term life policies that he was had to renew, and it really didn't go up hardly at all.
I'm not aware of what the premium price was with with the first policy that you're speaking of, or what the different, or what the one that you're saying was renewed, what the price point was on that either.
That would be
But
unusual for it not to go up quite a bit.
I mean, it depends. It depends on what type of policy it was. It depends on whether or not it was one through work, meaning was it a group policy? I mean, there are all sorts of factors that can play into how much a policy is, and so I mean, really, without seeing the details of the policy, I can't speak to that.
And really, just one other topic here, and that was you talked about being there when Nancy made the phone call to Detective Posey
Yes.
to ask for a letter exonerating her
Who,
from the murder.
whoever I wasn't aware of the person who
Oh,
she
okay.
spoke to, but I was there when she made the phone call. Yeah.
So I just want to make sure we're talking about the same phone call.
Yes.
You were
Yeah, the
there
one
when
that she was. Mhm.
she made a call to Detective
She
Posey.
made a call, she wrote an email. I don't remember exactly how the contact was made, but I remember being there at the point that that was necessary and being there when it happened.
No, I just want to be sure. This isn't a call that Nancy told you she had. You were there.
I was there. We were upstairs working in the office, and like I said, I don't remember exactly how the contact was made, but I remember that was one of the things that we were doing.
And do you remember
I
if the
was,
detective called her or if she called the detective?
I believe she called the detective, but once again, I'm
You said that it was because that Nancy had talked to one of her insurance companies and had been prompted to call Detective Posey.
yes.
So first question I have on that is, when did this phone call take place?
Um,
Let's use
are you
Dan's.
asking for time of day? Are you
No,
asking?
let me give you a reference point. Dan died on June 2nd.
Okay,
How far after June 2nd was this phone call made?
I don't know.
You know, any idea?
Sometime within that 6 weeks that I was there, I couldn't tell you more than that. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't the first thing that happened. I know that. I was there. We were working on the house, and it was just one of the things that was going on when I was there. But as far as time frame, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Well, let me give you some more time reference points then. You
Okay,
said that you got there for sure within a week.
but way more. No, within a couple of days.
Okay.
Within a couple of days,
You're there within, can we say within 3 days?
most likely yes.
Okay.
I
So,
wouldn't say more than that.
okay, you get there. Let's just say you get there on day 3.
Okay,
So you're there on, let's say, Tuesday,
okay.
Monday or Tuesday, maybe Wednesday.
Whatever day that the memorial was, that's the day that I got in.
Okay. The one at the school.
Yes,
And when you say the school, are you talking about the Culinary Institute?
the Culinary Institute.
Okay, and
Yes.
this was an actual like memorial
This was
service.
a memorial service that was done at the school
It's
with a
not the
family and
vigil.
no, this was with family and friends, and it was a private.
That's the day that you got there.
Yes, that's the day that I got there.
Okay. And so what you're saying is regarding this phone call to, you don't know who it is, but Detective Posey, let's say,
Hmm.
that phone call did not, was not within the first day or two of you getting
No,
there. It wasn't first priority of business.
no.
Okay. One second. Okay. Uh, well, let me ask you this. Trying to work out the timeline here, so let me ask you this. Uh, you said that it was a company that had informed her that she needed this letter.
Hmm.
So that she gets on the phone, she calls Detective Posey, or he calls her. Doesn't really matter. Do you know which company that was that prompted her to call?
No, I don't recall. Um,
Did she call the insurance company, or had they called her?
I, I don't remember if it was an email. I'm not, I can't remember it. Like I said, I don't know if it was an email where they had contacted her or if it was that they'd called her. It was probably in an email. But I'm not sure on that either. I just know that it was something that she was instructed to do, um, to, that was required of them to release.
Are you aware that she actually called 5 insurance companies around the time that she called Detective Posey? Same day?
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there were multiple policies.
Okay. But you said it was a policy that she talked to that prompted the phone call.
It could have been multiple. It could have been one. It could. I can't.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And do you recall what the, maybe you don't remember the name of the company, but do you remember the size of the policy of the company that was telling her she needed to call?
No, it wasn't. The size of policies weren't. They weren't relevant to what we were. I mean, I was still. I was. It wasn't relative. It wasn't. She was not saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm waiting to get this much money." It was just we were working on the house. She was mourning, and that was really much more the focus than anything. I have no idea what size the policies were.
Well, you said you overheard the conversation.
Yes,
So what did Nancy tell the detective what size the policy was?
I don't recall her telling the officer what size the policy was.
So you don't recall her telling detective or whoever this was on the other end of the line that she was calling just to try to collect on a little $40,000 policy?
No.
And do you recall in that same phone call that she did not disclose any other policy to the detective?
That, I mean, that I don't recall the conversation past that she needed, that they had instructed her to be cleared as a witness, and she thought that was strange, but she was doing what she was instructed to do.
Okay. And then just to be abundantly clear, Dan died on June 2nd.
Hmm.
You're saying this phone call, no way that happened on June 6th.
I couldn't tell you. What I'm saying is,
Well,
no, what I'm saying is that it happened within the time frame that I was there, but I have no idea what time frame it was within the time that I was there. I know it didn't happen on the first day that I was there,
okay. Did it
and
happen on
that's
the
about
second
it.
day?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying is that I really can't tell you. I know it happened within the time frame that I was there in those 6 weeks.
All right. I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, redirect.
Yeah, just a couple questions. When you would earn an insurance commission, would the company hold back 3 months of your commission?
Um, yes, because we would get paid for about 9 months of it, and they would hold the 3 months.
So if you sold three policies in a day, then 9 months worth of your commissions were being held back by the company?
No, not nine
How does
months.
that work?
I'm sorry, not 9 months. 9 months worth of policies were being paid forward. So we got an advance to say
Okay.
on 9 months worth.
But if you sold multiple policies, they would have had multiple holdbacks, is that right?
Yes,
And those holdbacks would be in an account, so if someone did cancel a policy, there would be a way for the company to recoup the commission that, or the advance that they had given to you?
recoup or I mean, it would be going towards that policy.
So
So,
maybe recoup is a bad
okay.
word. Would they deduct from your next commission the canceled commission?
Yes, yes, they would.
But they could also, if for some reason you didn't have enough commissions, they would have this holdback bucket that they could then go to not recoup, I shouldn't say recoup, but to get their money back on the money that they'd advanced.
In part,
Okay.
yeah.
Is there a part of, and I know that I'm sounding like an idiot, but is there a part I need to understand better?
Um, I'm not sure. I think that you're saying it correctly. That I mean, basically, what happens is you get an advance whenever you sell a policy. That you get an advance, and you get that relatively soon, within the first, first couple of weeks, I believe, and then um, after all the policies premiums are paid, then you get that little back at the end. But if not, then the part between what was paid and up to that 9 months, is owed back to the company.
Okay.
And that generally what happens is you have other policies that come along, and like you said, it would come out of the policies that you're being paid forward. So that the company always gets their money, they get their money, but but so that's how that generally worked. Was that clear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that we both understand each other. We'll
Okay.
just hope they do. How about
Okay.
that? Okay. Um, did you sell the forester's policies when you were
Yes.
here? And are there a number of different kinds of forester policies?
Yes, there are. There's term, there's whole life. There was also an IUL. I can't remember exactly what that, like, universal index something. I'm not sure, but that was a policy that was a little different than term or whole life. Term is something that you buy for short periods of time. Um, to cover like a mortgage or specific need. For whole life is something that you carry the entire way through your whole life, and you expect that to, at the end of your life, take care of. And then an index policy, that was something that you would buy maybe just a little bit amount of insurance, and it worked like a whole life policy, except that you would overfund it because that overfunding would go into an account that I believe it earned interest, and there was something that later you could draw in on. So, like say in retirement years, or to pay for college, or something like that. That if you've overfunded it properly, that you could get money back out of it, and that you don't pay taxes on it until that time. So it was
So if you got one of these policies, there was a savings component to the policy.
yes,
So there was something in addition to a death benefit.
yes,
And the savings that accrued in the policy was something that you could take out later on,
yes.
tax-free.
Hmm.
But you could also borrow against that savings
Well,
component.
and I may not be remembering this correctly. I don't remember that it was tax free. It was tax free up until the time that you withdrew it, I believe. I
Okay.
think then it became tax liable. But and I'm sorry, I may be getting lost on details there.
Well, I may have
So
taken you down a road where both of us are lost,
okay,
but my question is, you overfund this policy,
yes,
and so there's a bucket of money,
yes,
and this bucket of money is something that you could borrow against, you could take a loan
yes,
against if you
hmm,
needed to.
yes.
And if you paid interest on the loan from this bucket of money, that interest would go back to you.
Well, it accrued interest is that savings part, or that bucket, that money bucket would draw interest as it was going. So
Okay. I
and
think
then
we're close enough.
okay.
What do you say?
Hmm.
Um, let me ask you this. It's been a bunch of years.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, it's been a stressful number of years as well. Is that right?
Yes.
Um, you talked about the fact that there were multiple deaths
Hmm.
in your family.
Yes.
And it wasn't just Dan Brophy's death or your Uncle Mark's death.
No.
Did you also lose a sister that year?
Yes.
Have you done your best to try to remember as well as you can?
Absolutely. Yes.
I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, may the witness be excused.
She
defense.
can for the defense. I understand the state has decided to
We
serve
have her
her with
under
a
subpoena.
subpoena.
Okay, all right, then for now, Mrs. Strata, you could step down.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and so who is the defense next witness?
Michael Peterson?
All right, Mr. Peterson, we'll have you come up and just step into the witness box, which is right over here. And my clerk's going to give you an oath before you sit down, so why don't you just stand as close to the microphone as you can, but stay standing, and raise your right hand.
Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask.
thank you.
And then because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
Absolutely. My name is Michael Peterson, Michael Peterson.
All right, and if you want it, there is water to your side there.
Oh, thank you very much.
Sure, whenever defense is ready.
Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Peterson.
Good morning.
For himself, son.
Oh,
He just said wait for the water.
oh, I thought we were having a cell phone emergency. but
No, that's
no.
okay. Sure, all right. When you
Mr. Peterson, how are you employed?
I am a chef.
Where are you a chef?
I work at the Screen Door on Burnside.
A breakfast place.
Yes. brunch and breakfast.
Brunch and breakfast? And how long have you worked there?
I've worked there for, I want to say, about 9 months.
Have you ever gone to school at OCI?
Yes.
When did you go to school there?
I believe that I started, if memory serves, October of 2018, and I was a student there up until their closure.
Okay. Um, Back up a little bit. Do you remember making a call to uh, the to 911 the day after Dan Brophy was killed?
Yes, I do.
And had you been at school the night before?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And so if I told you that Dan Brophy was killed on June 2nd of 2018 and that your call must have been made on June 1st of 2018, does that change your memory about when you started school there? Were you going to school when you made that call?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And you'd witnessed something the day before he was killed
Yes.
while you were at the school?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just leave it there. And did you go to OCI a couple of different times?
I started at OCI in their baking and pastry field,
Uh-huh.
and after I graduated, I went back for the culinary course.
Okay. So you've been on both sides of the
Yes.
OCI ledger. Are you familiar with a live fire?
Yes, I am.
Will you just, the jury's heard a little bit about it, but will you describe live fire for them from your perspective?
Yeah. Live fire is essentially um, it's like a mock kitchen service to give the students a little bit of understanding on how it is to work a line and the general realities of cooking at such a high pace.
There's a phrase that you used called, and I'm going to say it wrong, mise en place.
Mise en place.
Say it again.
Mise en place.
What is mise en place?
Mise en place means everything in its place. It is the chef's standard for prepping or pre-prepping specifically.
And is there pre-prepping that goes on for this live fire exercise?
Yes.
And who does the pre-prepping?
I would say it would most likely be the instructors, though the students do have a large amount of responsibility in that as well.
Okay. So can we just talk generally about the steps that would need to be completed before a live fire? What kind of preparatory steps do you recall?
The most important thing with the live fire starting off is a purchasing order. In order to have the right ingredients, the students must create a list of that and present that to the instructors, and the instructors then order that for purchasing. And students are also in charge of menu design, recipe design, and making sure everything is proper for their particular recipes.
So would a student, for example, would a student get the product out of the cooler?
No.
Why not?
When we did live fires at OCI, there were large racks that we usually kept all of our cooking material on for that particular live fire, all the ingredients and so forth from the walk-in coolers,
Mm-hmm.
and we would usually bring those into the classroom during that particular day.
I want to show you Defendant's Exhibit 313.3. It's going to show up on that screen and then behind you as well.
Mhm.
Oh, and now I want, yeah, now let's start with that one. Okay, can you see this cart that you've just described?
Yes, I can.
And where is it in the photo?
It would be in the very back right-hand corner.
Okay, you got a green poker there right in front of you.
Ah,
You
yes.
can stretch it out. And I wonder if you can show the jury, point to the jury, the cart that you were just describing.
Absolutely, that would be right here.
Okay. And if that was a cart that came out of the cooler, would that be something that a student would get, or would that be something that an instructor would have gotten?
An instructor would have that set up at the beginning of the class.
Now I want to show you 313.4.
Mhm.
Now, is that a close-up of the same cart that you just pointed to?
Yes.
And is that how it would appear at Live Fire, where you had the product sitting out there on the shelves, ready to go for the students?
Yes.
And that would be something that was prepared by the instructor as opposed to the students, is that right?
Yes.
Um, who typically would get the lights on within the kitchen where the students were gonna work before the live fire?
That would usually be whichever chef happened to be there first thing in the morning.
Okay. And as the chef was preparing for the live fire, would he or she need to get burners on?
Checking the gas lights of the burners is absolutely one thing that a chef would do
Okay,
in the
what
first
about
thing in the morning.
ovens? Do the ovens need to get put on?
The pilot lights need to be checked.
What, is there a commercial ventilation system within OCI?
I believe so, yes.
And does that also need to be turned on in the morning?
Yes.
What do you remember about that ventilation system? Do you know when it's on?
As long as the kitchen is operational, the vent system should be on.
Is it loud, I guess is my,
Decently loud, yes.
what other steps would need to be taken before live fire could begin?
Um, the carts, referred to by chefs as speed carts, would be fully set up. The kitchen, from gas to electricity to ventilation, would all be primed and ready, and the students would be assembled. But past that, the everything would be done by the students.
Okay. What if you had, what if would it ever be necessary to get a broth going or anything ahead of time?
Um, Often no, and especially on an event like Live Fire, I would say that would be done a night or two previously.
Okay. There any other things that you can think of that would need to be done in the morning before the students were prepared to start live fire?
The only thing I can think of would be possible deliveries that might be sent to the school
Okay.
for Live Fire, um, depending on if that any were to be dropped off that particular day.
Okay. And are you familiar with that bay door on the 17th Avenue side of OCI?
I believe I am.
Okay. And was that door sometimes open when you arrived at school?
No, it was not.
Would you be able to predict when that door was going to be open and when that door was going to be closed?
That door would be likely open for incoming deliveries. Um, Based on the culinary knowledge, I would expect that that would probably happen at some time early morning to mid morning.
Would you know when that was going to happen?
I do not.
I don't have any other questions, but the other side could.
All right, for the state?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Peterson. So just to clarify, you did the pastry program first, is that right?
Yes.
And so when were you in that program?
I believe, my apologies since it's been a little bit, but I believe that I started in the fall of 2018, if I remember correctly. Possibly 2017 though. It's been a minute.
Okay, so if you started the culinary program in October of 2018, would you have done the pastry program then the year before that?
Yes.
Okay, so you would have been a pastry student in June of 2018 when you called the police.
Yes.
Okay. So you never had Chef Dan Brophy as an instructor in the culinary program?
No, I did not.
Okay. In fact, you were never in the culinary program while he was still alive?
No, I was not.
Okay. And so any experience you had with live fire or the preparation or anything that went into that happened after Chef Brophy's death?
I'm sorry?
So your familiarity in the culinary program with live fire all happened when you started the culinary program?
Um, I also had to do a live fire for baking and pastry, I believe. Um, but that statement is correct that I did my culinary live fire after his passing.
And sort of two different, the programs are run a little differently, would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And were you a weekday pastry program student?
Yes.
All right. So you were not in Chef Damon's weekend pastry class.
I was not.
All right. And so you called the police after the murder had occurred.
Yes, I did.
All right. And you called Detective Brophy, or excuse me, Detective Posey, to let him know you'd seen someone smoking a cigarette by the school the night of June 1st.
Yes.
And fair to say that that person didn't threaten you, didn't have any weapons, nothing concerning?
Nothing concerning, no.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
All right, redirect.
Yes. If you weren't concerned by this fellow that you saw, first of all, what time of night did you see this guy?
I was just barely leaving my baking and pastry classes. This had been fairly late at night.
Okay. And where did you see the person?
After I left the school from the student's exit, he was right outside on the staircase.
So right on the OCI property.
Yes.
And he was smoking a cigarette.
Yes.
And you probably haven't called the police on people who were smoking cigarettes in the past.
No.
So what caused you concern about this guy?
This particular character I had never seen before. Most of the people at OCI were fairly well known and people knew each other. But there was also never anybody around the building at that particular time of night. And I had just remembered the details. And so after the next day, once I learned what happened to Chef Brophy, I stuck in my head and I was not sure if it would be an important factor for things. So I wanted to call the police to make sure that I got all the information to them that I could.
Okay. When you left the school that night, you were with one other person, is that right?
Yes, I was.
And that night, even before you learned about the death of Chef Brophy, did you two of you had a conversation about how sketchy this dude was?
We did make some comments about him, yes.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
All right, may this witness be excused? First for defense,
Yes.
for the state?
Yes.
All right, you can step down, thank you.
Thank you.
Who is the defense next witness?
Defense calls Matt Gitchell.
Okay. Mr. Gitchell, we'll have you come up and step into this box over here. And once you get in there, my clerk's going to give you an oath. So don't sit down, but just step as close to the microphone as you can.
Okay, I'll have you please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, then you may be seated and you may take off your mask. And then because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
My name is Matthew Gitchell, Matthew Gitchell.
All right, and there is a pitcher of water there if you want any. And then when defense is ready.
Want to get some water before we start?
Yes, please.
So, Mr. Gitchell, do you know Nancy Brophy?
Yes, I do.
Could you describe your relationship with her and how you know her?
Yeah, she was my wife, or she is my wife's aunt.
All right, so kind of a family member.
Yeah.
How long have you known her?
We must have met in maybe 2013.
All right. Do you live here in Portland?
I do.
And have you since 2013?
Oh, yeah.
All right. And when did you and your wife get married?
2013? End of 2013?
Okay. All right. So you must know Dan Brophy as well. You must have known him. How much time did either you and your wife, but you specifically, spend with Nancy and Dan Brophy?
Um, I met them while I was dating Sarah. And, by the time 2018 came around, I guess I'd see him every, 6 weeks to 8 weeks, 2 months, something like that.
Okay. What about holidays?
Oh, yeah. I was there Thanksgiving and Christmas for several years in a row.
Okay, so that was a regular thing for you to spend holidays together?
Yeah.
And then when you got together, you said it sounds like every month and a half or so?
About that.
What kinds of things would you do if it wasn't a holiday event?
Go over there and shoot the business. Sometimes meet him for lunch, out and about in town. Yeah.
Okay, generally speaking, was it all four of you that would do things together?
Sometimes it was Sarah and I and Nancy, but most of the time it was the four of us. Yeah.
All right. Right. What kind of relationship did you have with Dan Brophy?
He was uh, I wouldn't say paternal, but like I definitely felt like a member of the family, you know. Um, so yeah, good. He was kind of quiet in his way, but I feel like we had a meaningful relationship.
Okay. How long did it take you to get to the point that you felt like you'd really developed a relationship with him?
Um, Not that long. He was a guy that it took a minute to decode, but once you did, you could start to, you knew how he felt about you for the most part.
Okay. Did you get a sense of humor right off the bat?
Yeah.
Just describe that to us.
Just super dry. Super, super dry. Like admirably dry, like aspirationally dry almost. He was just a very funny and understated guy. Who was, economical but effective in the words he used.
And did you take that to be a sign of affection, that he appreciated your presence if he was being funny with you?
Yeah. No, I mean like that. Yeah. There's definitely he had a twinkle about him. Like if you're in the right, place.
Okay. And what about Nancy Brophy? Tell us about how she expressed herself.
Kind of, superficially opposite, like talkative, where Dan was not. Engaging, outgoing, where Dan, was less that. Just chatty and, you know, try to engage people, in conversation and, you know, ask about, your life, their lives, and yeah,
Is it fair to say that you often felt affection from her too?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely,
Do you and your wife have a son?
yes.
How old is he?
He'll be 8 in about 3 weeks.
Shortly before Dan Brophy passed away, before he was killed, did you have a birthday party for your son?
We did.
Do you remember that?
Mhm.
Were both Nancy and Dan Brophy present for your son's birthday party?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about the party in general, but also just your observations of them that day.
Um, you know, they both took to Max pretty well. You know, like you know, Dan had a great way with kids, and you know that kind of uh, yeah, just he was, you know, he would act in a way that would make the kids kind of engage harder to get a reaction out of him. I think, like a lot of people, like that, I think that's part of why he was an effective teacher. You know, it was just kind of a lot of, you know, like we had cake. You know, I had barbecued some stuff, and like I always got a little nervous whenever I'd make food for these
I
two
bet.
because like it was not my trade, but I wanted to, you know, I wanted to show that show both of them like that I knew like how to at least make decent food, if not good food. You know, but yeah, we just sat around and just yapped, and then had present opening, and you know, like the one thing I could never seem to get right around Dan in particular was timing, so they had to wait a bit for, you know, some pork to come off the barbecue. But you know, we made a family dinner of it.
Okay. And if Dan passed on June 2nd of 2018, how close would that have been in time to this birthday party for your son? You don't need to
Like
say exactly what your son's
it would have
birthday
been
was.
within 2 weeks, right? I mean, his birthday's May 26th, so we would have had the party either like the weekend before or after, knowing these things. I don't have a date book or anything to refer to, but yeah, it would have been certainly very close to that window.
Okay, all right. So were you actually able to see both the two of them interact that day too? And I mean Nancy and Dan Brophy. Can you tell us what you observed?
Um, you know, I think the best way to put it is nothing out of the ordinary or nothing unusual. Like they just, you know, like they had their modes of social interaction, and they were both in it. And like, you know, occasionally, you know, like in my experience, that was one occasionally asking the other for a little backup, a little affirmation, or you know, like if there was a long story to be told, it was kind of handed off to Nancy, and she would be the one telling the long stories as opposed to Dan. And yeah, nothing unusual.
Okay. And did you notice, how would you characterize the degree of affection between the two of them that day?
Yeah, same as it always was. Like they were, you know, they had a back and forth, you know, and it was a very, you know, to me it always seemed affectionate and always, you know, like they generally looked for and received support from each other when they're trying to, you know, get something across, or you know, make somebody's story more interesting, or elaborate like things that are, you know, appropriate for the audience, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. How many people do you think were at the party?
6 or 7.
Were you
It would have
inside or
been
outside most of the
maybe a little
time?
more. Like it would have been like our family, the three of us, me, my wife, my son, Dan and Nancy, and probably Rachel's family.
Okay.
Um, you know, the intervening time is, you know, just kind of made me think about Dan and Nancy there, but like I'm pretty sure Rachel and company were there too.
Okay. And what about their physical proximity to each other? Were they staying close to each other? Did you see them actually physically engage with each other at all?
I can't recall, but also like we didn't really have like, you know, a love seat or anything like where people would physically sit next to each other, like in our living room. Like it was, we were just pulling up chairs for everyone. So
Okay. But did you observe them kind of hanging out together
yeah,
at the party? All right. All right. Did what you observed that day, and I think you answered this because you said it was kind of like always, over the course of the time that you knew them, so from 2013 until Dan passed, so that was a good, pretty solid 5 years, it sounds like. Um, was that their regular mode of engaging? Did you notice any waxing and waning in their affection or the way that they treated each other? Did it seem pretty consistent?
no, like nothing notable, you know. Like I don't recall it. I don't recall ever hearing one of them snipe about the other one, you know, in any meaningful way. You know, a lot of good-natured, like, you know, Dan's a bit of a, a chaos agent as far as like things go, but also a guy who liked things a lot. He's also a chef, so he liked things in order in a certain way as well. So there's a little bit of like, you know, like playful acknowledgement of how the other person operated, I guess.
Again, kind of affectionate.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Well, thank you. Those are the questions I've got for you today.
Okay.
All right, and for the state?
Yes. So you'd say that you got to know Dan pretty well over those
Yeah.
several years?
I mean, there's obviously there's kind of a caveat with him where he was a very quiet guy, and so you kind of had to feel like you knew him. I think more than you actually kind of get. You would get the occasional deep conversation, but overall it was like, uh, yeah, he was not super open and demonstrative, outside of like kind of just face and demeanor, I guess.
Did you two ever discuss anything personal?
Um, you know, not outside of like the Vikings, you know.
So sports?
Yeah.
Sports, okay. But you didn't talk about your personal lives much?
I would try and screw up my courage to ask him like a cooking question or two, and that could get him, engaged in some, that he was a guy interested in various parts of that, and so, he would dig in there, but nothing like as a, no, nothing like what's the word I'm looking for? Like nothing primarily emotional in content. Is that the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
What I guess I'm getting at sort of in the end here is, you can know somebody pretty well, but not know everything about their life. Is that fair to say? You don't necessarily know what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah. But I don't disagree with that statement, I guess.
Fair to say that some people that you yourself even know, they have appeared happy in their life and they get divorced, and
Yeah.
surprising. You've had that experience.
I have.
So although Dan and Nancy appeared happy and healthy relationship on the surface, you might not necessarily know what's going on behind the door.
I mean, sure. I think it's a universal concept.
And I asked you about your conversation with Dan, but what about Nancy? Did you have more personal conversations with Nancy?
Yeah. Nancy was more, but like, an order of magnitude more talkative. So there's more opportunity to have those kind of conversations.
Sure. Did she talk about her personal life much?
In as much as it was the stuff she was doing day to day, like, sure.
But did she ever disclose anything about the relationship between her and Dan that you weren't seeing?
No, nothing, you know, nothing like encroaching on like marital counseling type topics, I guess.
Sure. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Operational stuff.
And what about like, their financial situation? Did she talk much about that? What was your impression of their financial health?
They seemed fine. Like, like we knew them long enough to, to settle into a pattern of what we did with them and where we met them and how often we'd meet them, and none of that seemed to ever really deviate. Like there was no, it was a pretty steady state, like time I've known them.
Okay. In your opinion, in the time leading up to Dan's death and your guys' spending time together, did they talk to you about what they were planning on doing in the near future?
Yeah, they, like there's, both these teams asked me about if I'd seen any retirement discussions. I would characterize what I was around for as like kind of throwing darts at a map kind of phase. Kind of loose discussion about how we're gonna, about what's next rather than like the mechanics of, funding it, right? It's just more about like, all right, what do we do? You know.
And
then it was a lot about like, okay, what has good food, obviously,
Yeah.
what was affordable, and then, what do we need to do, like basically like very light unpacking about like what's between point A and point B, but nothing beyond like, it's kind of like I'm thinking about going on vacation next year, like with people that I would talk to about such things, kind of like,
So casual, but still talking about some ideas.
yeah,
Okay. No firm plans.
correct.
Did they talk about selling the house as part of
Um,
those bigger plans, or?
I, like, I don't know if this is appropriate for the court, but I just assumed that was part of it. Like, you don't necessarily always, keep a house necessarily and talk about moving somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you didn't really talk about that.
Right.
You sort of assumed that as part of a bigger plan.
Yeah.
Okay. What about Dan, wrapping it up at the Culinary Institute, or, did you get the idea that Dan was ready to leave that?
No, there was no discussion of readiness, right? There was no discussion about, again, I think I'd consider it like one of the specifics of unwinding things. It was more about the intent to unwind rather than the specifics of how to do it or what the checklist was.
You talked about some of the things that you all would do together. It sounds like a lot of it revolved around probably food and eating and
Oh yeah.
getting together, that type of thing. And
Yeah.
you also mentioned something about sports, but did you and Dan do anything else? You guys go fishing, shooting, hunting?
No, like, I was, I started off feeling a little intimidated by him, honestly. Like I wanted to be part of that world, but I knew that like it was his job and I didn't want to like make him work off the clock, for his niece's husband. And so, I would have welcomed the opportunity. Like, I know that like they would occasionally do stuff for the family, that would be like a group class or something, and, once I had another successful, like, barbecue event or something, maybe I'll ask him more questions about doing stuff. But like, yeah, I
Did you ever?
thought we had more time, I guess.
Yeah. Sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
How did you find out about Dan's death?
I'd taken my like Sarah was down in Texas for a friend's birthday party, and I'd taken my boy down to um, Silver Falls, to do the hike there. I had thrown him on my back, and we were going around, and it was a great and beautiful day. And was driving home, and kind of enjoying that vibe, and then I got a phone call.
Who called you?
Sarah.
Did you reach out to Nancy?
No, I told Sarah that like, knowing that they were part of that community and that community was so active and the community treasured him so much and treasured them so much. I figured that they were, I didn't feel like I was totally integrated into the flow yet, and I figured that other people could be more help. So basically, I just said, well, let Nancy know that if she needs anything, that you don't want to ask a non-family member to do, like, I'll do it.
Did you ultimately end up helping out a little bit
Yeah.
after Dan had passed? Did you help Nancy move some stuff?
Yeah, it did.
Did a lot of that end up in your
Did some-
basement?
Did some house stuff. Yeah, kept a lot of stuff in the basement.
Okay. Have you ever gone through that stuff?
No.
Just sitting in the basement?
It's not my stuff. Yeah.
Did you help move stuff to a storage unit?
I don't think. No, actually, I don't. No, I was working. Sarah kind of quarterbacked that.
Did you actually pack anything up, or did you just help move boxes? Stuff. I shouldn't say boxes.
Maybe there was like a shift or two I pulled over there, like when we were doing the initial cleanup, but it was mostly just, it was not boxing stuff. It was moving things around.
Anytime when you were helping clean up or move any things, did you ever come across any firearms or firearm parts?
God, no.
Is that something Dan ever talked about?
No.
Never heard him talk about guns?
Mm-mm.
What about Nancy?
Mm-mm.
even after Dan's death, did Nancy talk to you about any guns that they owned?
Nope, not that I can remember. And I'm pretty sure I would have remembered at that point.
Why would you have remembered that?
Well, I mean, why? Like, because Dan was shot. I mean, I would have remembered somebody mentioning the gun, in that context, certainly.
And would it have just seemed unusual for that, the way that you knew them, would it have just seemed unusual for them to own a firearm, or would you take them as people who would own a firearm?
Like I don't tend to think one way or the other about it. I was raised around guns and know plenty of extremely liberal folks that have them here. So it's like,
But that's not why
it's
it
an all
was-
stripes thing for me.
Sorry to cut you off again. It's not something that it would have stuck out for that reason. You're saying it just because of the circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. And did Nancy tell, in talking to her after Dan, well, let me ask you first. Did you have conversations with Nancy after Dan's death?
Hmm?
Okay. Did those occur throughout that summer of 2018?
Yeah.
Okay. Did she ever talk to you about where she was on the morning that Dan died?
No.
Did you ask her?
No.
Okay. So it just wasn't something that came up.
I wasn't gonna grill, her, considering the loss that she and we suffered.
And after Dan's death, did she express to you that she had concerns for her finances?
Not specifically. There was some stuff around like the house and getting the house ready to sell and that kind of thing, but there was nothing in particular about, finances. Like, we were doing okay. Like there was no request for a loan or anything.
And is that something you could have helped out with if they needed help?
Hard to say, but I probably would have figured out a way if it was needed.
Sure. And the first time that you actually heard any discussion of plans for the house being sold, that came after Dan's death?
I don't think so. I think like there was a bit of, something that I found kind of relatable, right? Just wanting to get out of, a place that reminded you of what just happened. I think that was
right. And maybe my question was bad. I apologize, but I'm asking the actual discussions regarding plans to sell the house.
Right.
That came after Dan had died.
Yes.
Okay. Meaning Nancy's actual plans to want to sell.
Yeah.
The house.
Like I can't remember when I went by and painted stuff or, did some of that. The timeline's not super clear as far as that goes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I think that's all, Mr. Gitchell. Thank you.
All right, any redirect?
Just a little bit. Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Gitchell, Sarah's your wife, of course, right? And she provided quite a bit of support to Nancy after Dan's death, didn't
Oh, yeah.
she?
Definitely.
And you made that possible by taking care of Max, making sure that she was free to go over there and do those things?
Yeah, I mean, Max was in daycare, so it wasn't a huge, it wasn't a huge lift on my part, but yeah, I covered the home front.
Right. But I guess what I'm getting at is you might be selling short what you contributed, that you were contributing indirectly by being supportive of her and giving her the room to do that, and then also doing the things that you described to actually go over there and help
Yeah.
back.
I don't know if I'm the one to judge that.
So I want to go back to something that you said at the beginning of Cross. You said that they were in the throwing darts at the map phase of retirement planning.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to adopt that. I like that phrase. And you followed that by saying, I think, if I understood you correctly, that you assumed that they were planning to sell the house at some point because they were talking about where to live.
Yeah.
So they were exploring with each other, and probably in the context of these social engagements too, just throwing around ideas about this and that, and unless they were wealthy enough to hold on to the house, you thought implicit in that discussion was that there was this planning toward a day that they would be selling the house and doing something other than living in that house.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I think Portugal being part of the discussion, you know, because it was the cheapest place to live, you know, and also, you know, still had good food, obviously. You know, and I don't think you talk about, yeah, I don't know, like it just seemed like it seemed like that was, they're trying to figure out where to go that they could sustain themselves with what they had, I guess.
Makes sense. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming in. I don't have any further questions
All right. Is this witness excused?
for us. Yes.
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna sit down.
The defense calls Sergio Perez.
All right.
Huh?
All right, Mr. Perez, we're gonna have you come and stand in this witness box over here. And when you get in there, if you could just get as close to the microphone as possible, but stay standing, and my clerk will give you a note.
Okay, I'll have you please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, then you may be seated and you may remove your mask. And because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
Sergio Perez, Sergio Perez.
All right, and there is a pitcher of water there if you want it.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. And then when defense is ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Perez, what do you do for a living?
I work as a video expert. I work in criminal cases, state and federal court.
All right, so mainly it's in a litigation capacity, litigation support capacity?
Yes, litigation support and discovery management also.
Okay. Um, we hired you to work in this case to help us with some video?
Yes.
All right. Would you just tell the jury generally a little bit about your background and how you came to be doing this kind of work?
Well, I started to work as a paralegal in 2002 in a law firm. And then I moved to, after 4 years, I moved to another law office. I continued working as a paralegal, but then the job started to take my interest more in the science part and the forensic part of the cases, because they were all criminal cases. So little by little, I was switching to that data and forensic area. And in 2018, I decided to take classes to get my certification as a video analyst.
All right, so it sounds like there was a period of time that you're working as a paralegal predominantly, but you start doing some technical work as a paralegal and get
Yes.
more and more interested in it.
Yeah, even before taking my certification as a video expert, I worked a few years as analyzing videos also for the cases in civil and criminal cases. And also included was analysis of data like GPS data, cell phone, and phone records and all that.
All right, so when you move to the phase of deciding to actually get some education, some formal education, not just hands-on work-related education, but some formal education and certifications, did you start that process in about 2018? Is that what you said?
Yes, 2018, June and August of 2018, I took the classes to pass the 2 levels to become a certified forensic video technician.
Okay, so that's what you are now. Formally, the term is certified forensic video technician?
Yes.
Right. And do you have some related certifications, or is that the primary one that you rely on in your work?
That's the primary one. To renew the certification, you have to do every 3 years 80 hours of additional training, so which I did, and I renew my certification. So I did 89.5 hours, and you have to continue studying because the technology is changing continuously.
Okay. So I'd like to turn your attention to a project that you worked on in this particular case. Mr. Breton, could you bring up Exhibit 332? Did you recognize that photograph?
Yes,
Is that one that you created?
yes,
Did you create that from video that you were observing?
yes. I extracted it from one of the videos. Yes, and
All
this
right.
is Bellagios location.
Okay, when you say Bellagios, are you talking about the Bellagios on Southwest Jefferson?
Yes, that's correct.
Mr. Breton, would you go to 333? Now, was the close-up that we just saw, is that actually a part of this same still as well?
Yes,
And
yeah.
this is also a still from the Bellagios video?
Yes, I included this one too because it has a time. It's 3 hours ahead, so that would be 8:15:23 a.m.
Okay, so at what point was this image actually taken in Pacific time, Portland time?
That would be 8:15:23 a.m.
Okay, so what the timestamp shows there is Eastern time, it's 3
Eastern
hours
time,
ahead?
yeah. So it's 3 hours ahead.
Okay. So, and do you have independent information about who that is depicted in that video?
Yeah, I know that I don't remember the name of the person, but I know.
Did we ask you to identify a woman who was out walking a large black poodle?
Yes, that was the initial information that I got. So I looked in the videos for that, and there were the other dogs and people walking the dogs, and they were not.
Right,
They
right.
didn't have any resemblance to.
Okay,
Poodle.
all right. So, did we also ask you to look for some other specific people in the video?
Yes,
And then specifically a man named Oscar Taylor?
yes.
All right. While you were looking for Oscar Taylor, did you find some videos of some other pedestrians, some other people who were walking that you brought to our attention?
Yes, yes.
I'd like to show you, first of all, I'm not going to play the entirety of it, but I'd like to play enough of it for you to identify this and tell us which camera this was taken from. Mr. Breton, 231.2, if you would. Need my glasses for this. Is that actually playing? I can't tell. Okay. There. Okay, can you tell us from your notes or from your recollection, first of all, which camera, which video this was taken on?
This is the camera from the parking lot of the Affinity Group building. So the building is on the right side, and the camera is at the back of the building. So on the other side, it's 16th Avenue, and so the two people there, they were walking west, and so the white entrance there is like the middle of the street, and so
Which street are we looking at? Where, when the traffic goes on that road, which road is that?
this one is Jefferson,
Okay,
and so if you're going west, the next corner is 17th Avenue.
All right, so very close to OCI.
Yes,
To the
just half a
culinaries.
block. Yeah.
Okay. All right, and what time, when we were watching this video here, what time in the well, first of all, was this taken on June 2nd? Is this video from June 2nd of 2018?
Yes.
All right, and what time approximately are we looking at here?
So this is about 7:18.
Do you mean 7:18?
Well, this moment is 7:19.
All right.
Okay, so I'm considering that the camera is about 12 minutes ahead.
Do you think that this camera, the timestamp on this camera was only off by about a minute?
12 minutes.
Okay.
12 minutes.
Okay, so
About
what do you believe, based on all of the work that you were doing, what do you believe the correct timestamp would be?
Sorry, 12:18. Say, sorry, 7:18:09 a.m.
That's the beginning of that clip, starts at 7:18 on the morning of June 2nd.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. It's confusing, but what you're doing there essentially, as I understood what you just said, is you're making a 12-minute adjustment.
Yeah, it's a because this camera has when you look at the video, you have to think right away what's the difference in time. So yeah, but it's 7:18 a.m.
All
when
right.
this person crosses in front of the camera.
Okay, on the same morning that Mr. Brophy died.
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you if you would look then at 231.3 and tell us whether that's the same morning and the same camera.
Yes, this is the same camera at Affinity Group, and it's June 2nd.
And is this also an excerpt that you were able to identify and pull out for us?
Yes, yes.
Okay. What's the correct time? Not the timestamp, but making that adjustment. What's the correct time that this video was recording?
Oh, that's a 7:22. Let's see.
So this was within probably 5 minutes or so of the one that we just
7:24.
looked at?
Yeah.
This is about 5 minutes after the first one we looked at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, Mr. Breton, if you'd pull up 232.1. This also the same morning, obviously the same camera.
Yes, that is a little bit later than the other ones.
Okay, so about how much later? Tell us about I know this is moving, and so the timestamp's moving too, but about what time that morning did this occur?
That would be about 8:37.
Okay, so this is a little bit more than an hour later,
Yes,
and this is after 8:30 in the morning.
yes.
Was there audio that went with this video?
No, none of the cameras they have a audio.
All right, okay. Mr. Britton, would you pull up 230, Defense 230? Now, can you orient yourself on that exhibit and show us where the Affinity camera is, where the Culinary Institute is, and what we were looking at, that vantage point that camera shows us? And once you've got yourself oriented, it would be helpful if you could use that pointer and then help the jury also understand what that camera is actually looking at, what that was focused on.
Okay, so Affinity Group. Let's see.
Yeah. Mr. Breton, can you focus in on that a little bit more? Just kind of pull it out a little bit.
So
Okay, so now, once you get oriented, what would be really helpful is if you could help use that pointer, pull that out and
Okay.
actually show the jury on the big picture, the big version.
okay, so the camera at Affinity Group is over here. This is the building. This is 16th Avenue. So the camera is pointing that way. and so it's covering all this area. The
Okay, and give us some orientation about north, south, east, west.
Okay, so this side of the sidewalk, the street is that would be north.
Can the jury hear well enough? Can you project just a little bit more? Because now you're talking this way and they're behind you, so they need to hear what you're saying.
Okay. Okay, so the camera is on the south side of the street and it's pointing north. So the camera is covering the parking lot and the street, including the sidewalk on the other side.
Okay, so what's the big street there that's going kind of diagonally across the screen, not quite?
So this is Jefferson. We have 16th Avenue, 17th Avenue, and 18th over there.
All right, and there's been some discussion of Southwest Madison too. Can you tell us where that is in relationship to Jefferson?
Yeah, so Madison is over here.
Okay, so Madison's parallel to Jefferson, and is Madison north of Jefferson?
Yes,
Right.
1 block.
Okay, and is 17th to the east of 18th?
Yes, so this is 17th, and this is 18th Avenue.
Okay, and Jefferson is a one-way street there?
Yes,
So that's running west?
yes.
All right. Okay, which of those buildings, I know on that, this is a more recent picture, but which of those buildings housed the Culinary Institute at the time?
It's over here.
Okay. And you've seen photos of that building?
Yes.
There's been quite a bit of discussion about a big bay-style door, like a garage door, on the Culinary Institute. Where in that building was that bay door?
I think that it's over here.
Okay, on 17th?
Mm.
Okay, and then, so how far is that vantage point that you were showing us on that Affinity camera, how far is that?
So if the person is walking in front of the camera here, is in total is almost a block and a half.
Okay, right around the corner there on 17th, basically.
Yeah, after passing in front of the camera, so it's about 1 block or 1 block and a half.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. All right, so you can take a seat, and Mr. Britton, I don't think you need 2:30 up anymore. There were also some videos of an individual that we ultimately were able to identify as Oscar Taylor. Do you remember finding those videos?
Yes.
All right. Let me ask you a couple questions just about the ones that we just looked at. Those 3 subjects, were you able to determine that those were all 3 different people in the 3 videos we just looked at?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay. How many of those people appeared? Trying to remember all 3 of them. The man who was hiding behind the wall, the one that was later, that was more than an hour later.
Yes.
Which direction did he end up leaving?
Well, he crosses the street, north side of the street, and he hides there in the building, and then we don't see leaving him. We don't see that he left the area because he's still there when the video ended. We don't have more footage about that.
Oh,
location.
okay, so the video cuts off and he's still kind of in the
Yeah,
frame.
he's still there.
Okay. What about the other 2, the two that were a little bit earlier, a little bit more than an hour earlier? Both of those individuals are walking in that area that's just right around the corner from the Culinary Institute. What were you able to determine about where they went after we see them in those snippets?
Well, the 2 people that were walking there going west.
The first video that we just looked at then.
The person with the blue T-shirt.
Okay.
He stayed there for some time, and then he walked east.
Okay, I think what I'm thinking of is the first one, you're thinking of is the second one. So let's go look at that again.
Yeah.
I think 231.3 is the one that you're describing right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so this gentleman, this individual, after he goes off out of the frame, here at Affinity, what are you able to determine about what he does next?
Well, he stays there for some time, about 5 minutes, um, looking around and moving, walking, but he stays just there in that area.
Uh-huh.
And then after about 5 minutes, he left walking east.
Okay, so he leaves out of the frame going to the east?
Yes.
Okay. And now let's go back to 231.2. Which direction are these people going?
They are going west, Jefferson, like going to 18th Avenue, 17th Avenue.
And the one who's following there, did you make an attempt to yourself follow him visually after he goes out of this frame?
Yes, I actually checked all the cameras, especially the ones from Goose Hollow, because even though it's far from that location, which is from the corner there, it's about a block and a half. But the cameras, they can see the street far away, and even if you see just the
But
like
were you able to see him on the Goose Hollow camera?
no, no, I didn't, because you see when the person is crossing, even though it's a small image there, but you can
Okay,
tell
but
when the person is
You
crossing.
weren't able to see him on that camera, is what
No,
you're saying? Okay.
definitely no.
And then there are cameras in the next block, are there not?
Yes,
All right. The one that you showed us earlier, the woman walking the poodle, did you say that was the Bellagios camera?
yes,
Now, is the Bellagios camera also oriented looking across Jefferson to the north?
yes,
All right. And how far, if I understand what you're saying correctly, that's now a block to the west approximately from where we're looking now?
yes,
Is it more than a block to the west?
a block and a half.
And is there another camera that has kind of the same orientation in that block that looks north across Jefferson?
Yes, that would be a Starbucks. That is, that one is to the east of Bellagios camera, like in the middle of the street.
Okay, so is it Starbucks, as you're going west, driving on Jefferson, the one way that you can drive on Jefferson, first you would pass the Starbucks and then you would pass Bellagios right after that?
Yes,
Okay. What about those two cameras? Were you able to see that gentleman walking, continuing on in the same direction on Jefferson going west?
no, no, they disappear at that corner. There is no footage of them showing what direction they took, but they were going on that side of the road. So because I didn't find them in the other cameras, I'm assuming that they turned at the corner to the right. Because Starbucks, it doesn't have a motion sensor, so the camera is recording all the time. So it doesn't miss anything that passes in front of the camera on the street.
Okay, all right.
Just for a minute there. It's now 3:15, so why don't we take our afternoon break and be back on the record at 3:30?
All rise.
All right, please be seated. And defense can continue when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Perez, we now have in front of you State's Exhibit 96, and I'm wondering if Mr. Breton can bring that up. I wish I'd started with this one because it's a much better aerial of the neighborhood, a little less disorienting. Would you go through what you were showing us before on, you can point to the one in front of you, although they're identical. You point to the Affinity video, the building that actually is holding that camera.
Yes. So here is the Affinity location. This is 16th Avenue, and the camera was located on this side, on the south side of Jefferson. It's pointing in that direction, covering all this area.
I think everybody's well oriented enough now, but just show us Jefferson to be certain.
Yeah, so this is Jefferson
Going west.
going west. This is the location of OCI, Oregon Culinary Institute.
Okay, and give us the cross streets there just in that block.
This is 17th Avenue, and this is 18th Avenue.
And the one that's immediately to the north of Jefferson?
This is Madison.
Okay, and just show us again which side of the building that bay door is on.
It's over here.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't start with that one. All right, so let's go back to Mr. Taylor. There's a video excerpt that I believe you created. I'd like you to walk us through that. It's 231.1. And when you get oriented, can you tell us essentially what time of the morning this is? And let me also ask you, while we see him there, who is that subject?
So that would be Oscar Taylor, and he showed up there in the camera at 6:39 approximately. And in the location where he is right now, that's a restaurant. I know that.
Okay, what is immediately to the west there on Jefferson, right next to Affinity?
That's a restaurant, and you can also see a table on the sidewalk to serve people outside.
Okay. Okay, so from then you had access to the Starbucks video as well?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Britton, would you pull up 245.1? And is this the same subject that you were following earlier,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Taylor, yes. He's inside the Starbucks store.
Right. And what time is this video? Now, this obviously is a different timestamp on the Starbucks. What were you able to determine about the correct time of the Starbucks video?
This video starts at 6 a.m. and ends at 7:30.
But I'm asking about this excerpt. I'm not asking about how much of the video you had available.
Yeah, so this is exactly, he enters the store at 7:15:25.
Okay.
And he leaves the store at entering the store at 7:11:49 and leaving the store at 7:15:25.
All right. So you determined that he was at the Starbucks a little bit more than 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Breton, would you play 245.2, please?
This is another camera inside the Starbucks store and is behind the counter, and it's showing the same person, Oscar Taylor.
Okay, so is the time frame exactly the same? It's just a different vantage point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And Mr. Breton, could you then show us Exhibit 247, please? And do you recognize this camera?
Yes, this is
Go ahead.
the East Side Deli. It's at the corner of Jefferson and 18th Avenue.
All right, we're going to play that one more time when I don't have you talking over it. But can you show us on States 96 there, that map where East Side Deli is?
Yeah. It's over here, and the previous location, Starbucks, was over here.
Okay, so the two we just saw were in which building? No, the two, not, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The two that were from the same place, those were from Starbucks on what's still the south side of Jefferson?
Yes,
Okay, and so at that point, he's still on the same side of the street that he was when we saw the Affinity video?
yes,
Okay,
same side.
okay, and so we saw the Affinity on the south side of Jefferson. He's walking on the south side of Jefferson. We see the Starbucks. He must have been walking on the south side of Jefferson because he actually goes into the Starbucks. We see him walk past and go inside, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you see him from the camera that he's walking this way. He enters the store, he leaves, and he walks this way.
Okay, and then what we're about to watch again, this one that's up behind you, is now, that's across Jefferson.
Yeah, that should be here. It's a camera inside the deli store, and it's recording the inside the store and part of the street. So the camera is recording this side.
Okay, so what we're looking out now, we're looking from the north of Jefferson, across Jefferson to the south, except that we're kind of looking at an angle, it
Yes.
seems. But can you orient yourself by looking, just for a second, look at the exhibit behind you, the video? What's the direction that that camera's facing? I know it's inside East Side Deli, but can you show us on the map
Yes.
sort of which way we're looking?
So the camera is inside the store and it's covering this area over here. So it's here is the crossing. Here is the corner, the end of the street.
Uh-huh.
And so the camera is recording toward the corner, covering the street. The Starbucks was over there on the other side of the street, so farther that way.
Okay, and if cars were to go by there on Jefferson, which direction is traffic flowing?
That way.
Okay, so that's west.
Yes.
So actually, the camera is angled toward the intersection of what I take to be 18th?
Yeah, it covers part of the intersection, yes.
Okay, all right, so it's not looking back that way, it's looking this way.
Yes, more in angle, yes, yes.
Okay.
Because Bellagios store is over here, and we don't see that in that one, so it's more toward the corner.
All right, and what we see there is actually the crosswalk at the intersection of 18th, is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
All right. All right, Mr. Britton, would you play that one more time so we can actually look at it? All right, now after that, you have access to video from a camera that's at that church right there across 18th, at that same intersection, but opposite, kitty corner
Yes,
through that traffic circle.
yes.
Were you able to see him on that one?
No,
Okay. And then, did you have video from any of the businesses or anything going down 18th? Well, I shouldn't say down 18th, because at this point you'd be going north, right?
yes.
Did you have video from other businesses or homes or anything like that along 18th that you could review?
No,
Okay, and what about that block behind OCI on Madison?
no,
Was there video taken from any of those places?
no, nothing.
Okay, so there are several places that are along Jefferson, right?
Yes.
Did you have video that was from quite some ways north on 18th, maybe a block or so further up?
No.
What about at Zion Church? Was there some video from a church there?
Yes, but you can see just the other side of the church. I can point it here. So the church is over here.
No, 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 I'm talking about the other church that's up at Salmon.
Zion.
Uh-huh,
Yes, sorry. Yeah, that's farther away on 18th.
uh-huh,
It's north.
right.
It's about 2 blocks from this Side Deli. I reviewed that one, but he doesn't show up there.
You weren't able to find Mr. Taylor on that one?
No.
Okay. So what's the, I can see the timestamp that's actually shown on the video here, but what were you able to determine about this clock, what the accurate time would have been? If it's displaying 10:19:49,
Yeah,
the morning of June 2nd, what time was that actually filmed?
it's this camera is 3 hours ahead of real time.
And was it exactly 3 hours ahead?
No, it's approximately, there is a difference of just a few seconds with other cameras.
Okay, so it's not exactly 3 hours ahead, but it's within seconds?
Yes, yes,
The minute's generally correct?
yes,
Okay. All right, and that also is showing East Coast time?
yes, East Coast, yes.
All right, so that video, when we see Mr. Taylor coming across the intersection and then apparently walking, continuing on 18th, that's just before 7:20 in the morning.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then did you see Oscar Taylor later in any of the videos?
No, after this location, no.
Okay, did you put together kind of your own map that tracked his movements that morning?
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Britton, would you pull up 326? Why don't you walk us through that? And if you're able to do it standing, I do want to make sure they can hear you.
Okay.
But if you're able to use the pointer at the same time, that might be helpful because there's a lot going on in that diagram.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. The information that we have about him, the images, started here at Affinity, and he's there crossing that camera at around 6:40:52, and this camera.
Okay, so he's in the Affinity video at 6:40:52. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he stays there for about 2 minutes.
Okay.
So then he goes here to check things there. I don't know. I don't really know what he did, and then he continued walking.
Can you tell from the video whether there's some recycling there on the side, or you just
From the
not?
video, no.
Okay. All right.
So he continued on the same side of the street, on this sidewalk, going west. So here it shows the map that he went this way. Then in this area, we don't have any camera here. So he disappears from view for about 30 minutes.
All right. And then when do you pick him up? But the next time you see him is on that Starbucks video, right?
Yeah, that's so 7-11:49. He's entering Starbucks over here, so it's the same side of the street.
Okay.
And he stays there. I think he gets a coffee or something, and then he leaves the store at 7:15:25.
All right. And then what time again do you pick him up on that East Side Deli across the street?
Yeah, well, we see him also at Bellagios at 7:18, which is
Okay.
very close to Starbucks.
Sure.
And then East Side Deli, it has 2 cameras that is showing him crossing in front of the front door that is right at the corner of the store. So when a person is turning around, you actually see the person going this way on the screen.
All right. Okay. And that is again the last time that you are able to find him in the video at about just before 7:20.
Yeah, 1951.
All right.
But he makes another appearance here, the same video. It's he disappears for a moment, then appears again at 7:20, a few seconds after 7:20. He looks around and he goes back again, going north on 18th.
On 18th. Okay, and that's when it is a little after 7:20, not before 7:20, when you lose sight of him going north on 18th.
Yes, it's like 7:20 and a few seconds after that.
Okay, that's good. I don't think I have any further questions for you. Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Perez, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
No, you don't actually know Oscar Taylor, is that correct?
No.
Okay, you were just told that's who that person was?
Yes,
Okay. And you were asked to locate him on any video that you could,
that's correct.
that you were provided? Okay. And were you provided all of the video footage that was in Discovery?
Yes.
And so I want to talk to you first about, you talked about these two guys or two people that you see on the Affinity video walking west. And then you said you assumed they turn right on 17th. What are you basing that assumption on?
Because they're going on that side of the road and they don't show up in any other camera. So it's an assumption that that means that they must have turned at the corner. There is not an entrance to a building there at the corner. So you have to cross the street and there are more stores ahead, but I don't find an explanation besides that they turn right at that corner.
You think that's the only possibility?
It's one possibility.
What are the other possibilities?
That I don't know, he entered in a building right at the corner.
Let me ask you something, Mr. Perez. If you're talking about this intersection right here, right?
Yes.
Okay. You said, well, you assume they just took a right.
Yes.
And went this way. Why couldn't they have just gone left?
Well, I checked the PG camera, and I don't see a person at that time crossing or turning, even though the camera is far, but you can see people that are walking that area.
And you watched that video for how long?
No, I have seen the whole video, but I reviewed the video in that time frame specifically to check for any of those people that you see there.
So you're saying they didn't walk straight through. They could have been in this area, say around this restaurant, and passed later on. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I collected the clips on all the people that I saw at the PGA.
How late in the morning did that PG video go?
It's I think it's 6:30 to 7:30.
Okay. So you only had footage up to 7:30?
Mm.
So if these people waited and passed past 7:30, you'd have no idea.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And isn't there an apartment building right here?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you know they don't live in that apartment and they just went home?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're basing most of this off of the fact that they didn't cross the street while on the video.
Yes.
Okay, so if they walked outside of the frame of the video, say right around this tree, or say the crosswalk, and that's where they crossed, you wouldn't be able to see that. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
And in fact, you watched Oscar Taylor walk on the south side of Jefferson. You watched him go up to a crosswalk, and that's where he crossed.
Yes.
But you just have video of that, so it's easier to tell.
Yes.
But the fact that he's on the south side of Jefferson makes no difference, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You talked about Oscar Taylor eventually heading up north on 18th.
Yes,
And essentially, you don't know where he went after that.
that's correct.
Okay, in Madison, it not only goes west of 18th, east of 18th, back towards the school. It also goes west.
That's correct.
Okay, and it goes up west quite a ways, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And the church that the north church on 18th, that video, that's actually just up towards the top part of this photograph, right? Or map.
Yes.
Okay. And so if Oscar Taylor would have continued going up 18th and say, tried to get into the area of the school where the business is on the left, you don't have any video of that.
No.
Okay. And could you tell what Oscar Taylor was doing with that can?
I suppose he was collecting stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is it consistent with somebody that's picking up items, specifically cans that are worth money? Is that consistent with what he's doing?
Could be. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, if somebody told you that he was actually canning that morning, collecting cans to turn in for money, would that be consistent with what you were seeing on the video?
Possible. I don't know. I didn't see him doing that. So
Sure.
yeah, I just had to.
But you're not seeing anything that's suggesting he's doing something else.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, may the witness be excused.
For us, yes, although I think I need to move the exhibit.
All right, sure, yes, thank you. And is for the state as well?
Not under subpoena.
Okay, all right, Mr. Perez, once the obstacles are out of the way, you can step down.
Thank you.
And if you could just put your mask back on the way out, thanks.
It is blown up today.
All right, the defense next witness?
The next witness is Josiah Roloff, and he's by WebEx as well.
Okay, all right.
Should I get this queued up for you? I think I've got it. Okay.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, yes, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Roloff. This is the courtroom clerk. Could I have you just say a couple words so that our software detects you and brings you up on the screen as an active speaker?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. I'll just have you keep talking for another couple seconds.
Testing, testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Okay, give me just a second. I'm not quite sure.
Check me to keep speaking.
Yes, please. It's a little slow today.
No worries. Just standing by here.
There we go.
All right, we can see you now, Mr. Roloff. So what we'll do is have you raise your right hand, and my clerk will give you an oath.
Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, and then because we're being recorded, I'll ask you to please state and spell your first and last name.
Yes, my name is Josiah Roloff. Josiah is Josiah. Roloff is Rolloff.
All right, and whenever defense is ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Roloff, what do you do for a living?
I'm the president and a senior digital forensic examiner at Roloff Digital Forensics.
And how long have you been a digital forensic examiner?
It will be, it is 19 years as of this month.
Tell us a little bit about your background, your education, your experience, and how you decided that that's what you wanted to do.
Sure. I began with an associate's in the applied science of network engineering from Spokane Community College. I later followed that up with a bachelor's in liberal studies with an emphasis in program management from Whitworth University. I have a number of certifications that are related specifically to the field of digital forensics. It started with a certification from Oregon State University in computer forensics, followed up by a certification by New Technologies Institute with a certification in computer forensics. I've been certified by the International Society of Forensic Computer Examiners as a certified computer examiner, or CCE. I have the NCASE certification from formerly Guidance Software, now OpenText. I have 3 different certifications related to some mobile forensic tools created by a company named Celebrite. That includes their logical operator, their physical analyst, and their certified mobile examiner certifications. In addition to that, I just have a lot of ongoing educational training that has occurred over the years, both formal and informal, related to conferences, trainings I attend in person, now trainings that we attend kind of remote via Zoom, etc., as well as just lots of self-study, which is really required in this field.
Okay. And did our firm approximately a week or 2 ago ask you whether you could review Nancy Brophy's AT&T records and provide us with some information about the frequency of her contact with Dan Brophy's family over the summer of 2018?
Yes.
And did you have full access to her AT&T records?
I did.
Okay. And specifically, was the time range that we asked you to review June 2nd, 2018, the day of Mr. Brophy's death, through the date of her arrest on September 5th of 2018?
That is correct.
Right. Mr. Breton, would you pull up exhibit?
Chris, could you hold on 1 second?
Sure. They're all redacted. Yeah. This time I remembered. Mr. Breton, if you have completed the redactions, thank you, to 323, would you pull that up first? Yes, that looks good. All right. And scroll down a little bit, if you would. How many pages is this document? All right. Thank you. Whoops. You've got a number up there. 4. Move it. You need to move off of that. You've got a number up there. Okay. Exhibit, what we're looking at now, our exhibit 323, is an exhibit that you created?
Yes.
All right. And without specifying the exact numbers, did we ask you to review the frequency of the telephone calls between Nathaniel Stillwater and Nancy Brophy?
You did, yes.
All right. And I do want you to avoid using the actual numbers. We'll just use names for purposes of this examination today. Were you able to ascertain whether there were some calls between the 2 of them in that time range I gave you?
Yes, I was.
And what did you determine about how many calls there were between the 2 of them?
I believe there were 18 phone calls that were from Nancy Brophy's telephone number to Mr. Stillwater's phone number. And then there were another 43 calls from Mr. Stillwater's number to Nancy Brophy's number.
All right, so there were a total of 61 calls between the 2 of them?
Yes.
All right. And Mr. Stillwater did place more of those calls than Nancy Brophy did?
Yes.
All right, but it was close to a 2-to-1 ratio?
Yes.
All right. And what were you able to determine about the total length of time that the 2 of them talked over the course of that summer?
The length of time, when you add that, it was a little over 3 hours.
Right. And then did you go through the same exercise with respect to Karen Brophy and Nancy Brophy?
I did. There were 2 numbers associated with Karen and Jack Brophy, yes.
All right. And then, Mr. Breton, if you're comfortable that you've completed the redactions on this one, would you look at Exhibit 322? And again, show us the All right, and with respect to these calls between Nancy Brophy and Karen Brophy, and let's just assume for now that we're talking about Karen Brophy, not Karen and Jack Brophy, okay?
Sure.
So how many, what was the total number of minutes that they talked over that summer?
It was over 10 hours.
Okay. And were you able to ascertain how many times Nancy Brophy called either the cell phone of Karen Brophy or the home phone of the two of them?
Yes, there were 58 different calls.
And how many calls did Nancy Brophy receive from either of those numbers associated with Karen and Jack Brophy?
95.
Okay. And were they also texting?
They were.
How many text messages were you able to see were going from Nancy Brophy to, I guess they must have only been to the cell phone, right? How many text messages were going from Nancy Brophy to Karen Brophy that summer?
77.
And what about incoming? How many times did Karen Brophy text Nancy Brophy?
107 times.
So it looks like there were a total of 153 calls over that 3-month period, roughly 3 months.
Yes.
Right. And in combination, about 184 texts exchanged between them.
That is correct.
And I don't want you to go through all 184 texts or 153 phone calls, but what was the distribution? Was there a period of time toward the end where there just wasn't much traffic between them and much communication between them, or how would you describe that pattern, the distribution over that 3-month period?
Oh, there was communications taking place each of those months. From time to time, you would see some days or a few days in a row where there would be no activity, but it seemed like there was no significant gaps in time.
All right. And did that continue right through September 5th?
Yes, I believe it did.
Now, were you also able from the AT&T records to conduct some of the analysis of where where Nancy Brophy was physically during that time period?
I was able to conduct analysis on locations that her phone could potentially be based on connections to different cell sites.
All right. And I don't want you to give their home address, but did we provide you with the home address for Karen and Jack Brophy?
You did.
Right. And did you check that specific address? And by address, of course, as has been explained before in this trial, the CSLI data is not equivalent to GPS. It's not able to pinpoint a particular house. It just locates activity off of a particular cell tower that might be near a house, but of course would be near other homes and businesses around the tower as well. Is that correct?
That is correct in this case, yes.
Okay. And what geographic range, in an urban area like Southwest Portland, what geographic range would a cell tower normally cover?
It can really depend, but it's usually going to be around 1 mile to 2 miles.
Okay. And how is it that the technology and the analysis that you do narrows it down so that you have a better idea within that area where a person actually is?
You know, maybe you could repeat that question. I'm not exactly sure what you're specifically asking.
When you're in an urban area and there are multiple cell towers, one tower may cover 1 mile or 2 miles, but there are multiple towers that are nearby. How is it that you're able to ascertain more exactly where a person is using those multiple towers to kind of narrow that down?
Well, you can compare it to towers that exist that are not being used, but frequently with data sets that are coming from third-party service providers such as AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, one of the best types of evidence is corroborating evidence. So additional information that exists that demonstrates a phone is in a location that you believe it could be in based on the CSLI analysis.
Okay. So when you were assessing when she might have been visiting Karen and Jack Brophy's home, how did you go about determining what those potential visits would be?
So first I received the address for Karen and Jack Brophy. And then with a review of the different data points that exist within the CSLI data sets, those include calls that were being routed through specific towers, the sector that those calls were routed through, so which side of the tower the calls are routed through. But looking at that exact same scenario with other data points that exist from AT&T in this case, such as data transactions that took place, such as when text messages were transferred through the network. And then in addition to that, with AT&T, we have what's kind of considered a more precise historical location data point, which is called NELOS in this case. And that's AT&T attempting to locate the actual location of the phone. And there is a confidence rating that AT&T provides with it. So it's not oftentimes extremely exact, but it can be more specific than the full area a cell tower could cover, for example. And so looking at those data points and overlaying them with essentially potential coverage area for Karen and Jack Brophy's home is how I made determinations about different points in time when Nancy's phone could have been at that location.
Mr. Breton, would you pull up Exhibit 324, please? So what were you able to determine about the number of times that she potentially had visited their home?
I determined that there were 25 dates between June 2nd and September 5th of 2018, where there were accesses to cell towers that had the potential coverage area of that home.
And Mr. Breton, could you go to page 2 briefly? All right, could you return to page 1? So again, without reading off the specific dates and times of each and every one of those 25 visits, could you describe what you were able to determine about a general pattern of visits?
Yeah, so there were more visits or potential visits in June. There were a few less visits in July, and going forward, each month had a few less visits. So you could tell that June appeared to be a time frame where potentially her phone was at that location a lot more frequently. In addition to that, what you'll see in this exhibit is each data point entered as a time. So for example, on June 3rd, you can see a whole string of times where there are data points that were provided by AT&T that demonstrate a transaction was routed through their network on a cell site facing Karen and Jack Brophy's home with the potential to cover that area essentially. And so you'll see all of those listed, each one of those data transactions when they exist, listed in association with each of these dates.
All right, so there are, as you mentioned, there are a number of apparent visits or potential visits to their home in the month of June. And then there is a space of a couple of days in late June. And then let's go to July. So does it appear to you in July she is visiting them roughly once a week? And if you presume that these visits in fact are to their home, and I know that we don't have GPS sensitivity here, but given the parameters that you've described already, does it appear that she is at least potentially visiting their home roughly once a week in July?
Yeah, at least once a week. I mean, we have 6 different occasions here, I believe. So yes, at least once a week it would appear that could be the case.
All right, and then Mr. Breton, if you would go down again to the next page. Does that pattern hold true essentially through August as well?
Yes, there are 4 visits, potential visits in August as well. Some of them are close in proximity to each other, such as the 18th and the 19th, but there's a total of 4 visits or potential visits.
All right, and then the last visit that you record, and we're presuming it's a visit, but we don't know that for sure. That would be on September 2nd of 2018.
That is correct.
All right. Did you also have access to the same types of records for Karen Brophy's cell phone?
No.
So what you're assessing here is when Nancy Brophy's cell phone was in the vicinity of her in-laws' home, but you weren't able to do the corresponding analysis of when their cell phone might have been in the vicinity of her home.
Correct.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Yes, thank you. I think I might just have a few questions for you, Mr. Roloff. Oh, sorry, I'm over here. I'm looking up there, and you're going to see me on the screen here. If they adjust the camera, if not, there we go. I'm right here. So these calls between Nathaniel and Nancy and Jack and Karen, I saw up on the exhibit when it was flashed up on the screen that some of these calls, it looked like, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like the length was sometimes listed as 0 or just a few seconds. Is that what those numbers were representing, the length of the contact?
If you're talking about the ET, yes, that would be the elapsed time of the duration of the call. So if you see 0 or you see 2 seconds or 4 seconds, that would be the full duration. That does not include the seizure time. So the seizure time is going to be the amount of time it took for the call to connect over the network. So this would be the true connection time.
Okay, and just so make sure I understand that, so if I call somebody on my cell phone and it's ringing, trying to connect to the person, that's starting that seizure time.
It even starts before the ringing, yes.
Okay, so like when I hit send,
Correct.
that starts that seizure time. But the time that I'm actually,
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't let you answer. But the time that the actual call is connected, that's that ET time.
That is correct.
Okay, and ET again stands for what?
Elapsed time.
Elapsed time, okay, thank you. So on these ones where we see zeros or just a few seconds, you're saying those are likely not connected calls.
Well, they're probably connected, or at least if there's a few seconds, it just, the duration may have been very short. It could have been the start of a voicemail, for example, or it could have been a very short call, or the call, almost connected and it ended before anyone actually spoke, for the zeros, for example.
I see. And so out of these 61 calls between Nancy and Nathaniel and the 153 calls between Nancy and Jack and Karen, are you counting those that show up with the ET of 0 or just a couple of seconds?
I am. I'm counting every single record that shows a potential transaction between those numbers during this time frame.
Okay. And so these aren't necessarily connected calls. These are attempts, some of them.
It is both, correct.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And then you talked about the 25 visits or so. And I don't think you were calling them visits. I think you're saying that Nancy's phone was in the area of a tower that also services Jack and Karen's home. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I would say it has the potential to service their residents, just based on its proximity, the direction of the antenna, and so yes, it's the potential.
Okay. Now, Jack and Karen Brophy didn't really live all that far from Dan and Nancy Brophy. Is that right?
It was not all that far. I mean, that's kind of relative, but yes, you can pull up a map and see both locations relatively easily.
Okay. Now, we've heard a lot of testimony, not just from you, but about the reach of towers and things like that. I'm assuming you're saying that that tower that potentially services Jack and Karen's home is not a tower that could possibly also service Nancy's home?
It would be extremely unlikely, and also from my analysis of Nancy's and Dan's records for when they were at home, this would not be a tower I'd ever seen their phones use, or at least alternatively briefly use while it appeared their phones were at home.
Okay. So let me know if this is a fair statement. When you see Nancy's phone at what you would sort of conclude is her home. When you are talking about these other towers, you feel comfortable saying that Nancy must, or the phone must have left Nancy's home.
I would feel comfortable saying that, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to focus on just one day, and that's on June 2nd, 2018. That's the day that you analyzed for these purposes, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you mentioned, or I'm sorry, you put in one of the exhibits that Nancy's phone appeared to be in the vicinity of that tower that potentially could cover Jack and Karen's home. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and was that first communication with that tower at about 1:08 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay, but just at 1 o'clock, so 8 minutes prior, you showed Nancy's phone at, or sorry, in the area of a tower that serviced her own home.
No, I don't believe I did. So what you're seeing there for June 2nd, you're seeing two different data sets. One is a NELOS data set. That NELOS data set shows the location of Karen's home. And that NELOS data set is independent of actual cell tower transactions. That's going to be related to the service provider trying to triangulate essentially where her phone is at that moment. And then you're going to see a number of towers that are related to a data connection in addition to that. And that data connection can last a very lengthy amount of time. And so you see the time that it starts, which is that 1:08 p.m. time. But it ends much later in time. And you can see that that transaction touched multiple towers before it ended. And it ultimately ended at, it appeared to be Nancy's home.
Okay, and that was at about 1:42?
I believe it was about 1:42.
Okay, so you said from 1:08 to 1:42, so we're talking about 34 minutes?
Yes.
And is it safe to assume that some of that time, at least, and based on the cell tower connections, some of that time would have been travel?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're seeing Nancy's phone in the area of the Brophy residence, I'm sorry, the Jack and Karen Brophy's residence at that 1:08 time, and you're seeing it back at her home by 1:42.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roloff, for your time. I don't have any other questions.
Any redirect?
Yes. Mr. Roloff, let's look at the very next day, June 3rd. And Mr. Breton, I was trying to avoid pulling this up so that we wouldn't even disclose the neighborhood, but let's, why don't you pull up Exhibit 324? So on page 7, Mr. Breton, can you see that, Mr. Roloff?
Yes, I do.
All right. So in this frame, in this slide, you, I believe, have captured Nancy Brophy's phone registering at her own home. Is that correct?
Registering at her own home, again with a data session. So when we look at AT&T logs, when a data session is initiated, those data sessions typically they can run up to about 60 minutes. Multiple data sessions can actually happen at the same time as well and overlap. But when we have a data session and we have a phone moving while it has that data session, you oftentimes will see multiple towers being utilized to maintain that session. And so what you can see here, again, this is with a data connection versus a call or versus a text. You can see it started at Nancy Brophy's home, and then it appeared to end over at apparently Karen Brophy's home and residence.
All right, so let's follow this through. That's page 7, and at least as the way this exhibit displays it, that is, includes the 2:47 p.m. Is that correct? Is that the beginning of the data?
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So if we go to the next frame, exactly an hour later at 3:47 p.m., her phone is now registering off the tower that covers her in-laws' home. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right, and then in frame page 9, what is this showing us?
So this is showing us that same tower being utilized, this time for a text message that's being routed through it.
All right, and what's the time of that?
3:53 p.m.
Right, and that still is the tower that's near her in-laws' home.
Yes.
Okay, and then in the next frame, page 10, what is that showing us?
This is a NELOS data point. So this is not a tower actually being used. This is AT&T saying where they believe the phone is, and then they produce the confidence rating in meters that you see there in that color.
So that rating, that confidence rating is actually showing a much tighter circle, much closer to her or more tightly framed on her in-laws' home.
Yes.
Right. In the next frame, what's that showing us?
It is another NELOS hit, this time at 4:14 p.m. The last one was at 3:58 p.m. So again, showing you not a tower that the phone is routing a transaction through, but where AT&T believes the phone might be.
And what's the time of that transaction?
4:14 p.m.
And the next page, what is that showing us?
Another NELOS hit at 4:30 p.m.
All right, let's go to the next frame. What is that showing us?
This is a data session that's routing traffic through the tower, the same tower that we've seen previously. This happens at, starting at 4:33 p.m.
All right, and the next?
This is another NELOS hit for 4:38 p.m.
And Mr. Breton, would you go to the next frame? What is this showing us?
Which page are you on? I'm sorry.
I'm on 15.
Okay, 15. It's a little bit cut off, but I can make it out here.
Can you bring that?
So that is.
Mr. Breton, can you have that actually displayed completely? Thank you. Is that better?
That is. Thank you.
Sure.
So this is a data session that is being routed through the same tower we've seen previously. This is occurring at it's initiating at 4:47 p.m.
And let's go through the next of these. If you see something that is different in type than you've mentioned so far, we can slow down, but let's go through these. Page 16, Mr. Breton.
So this is a NELOS data point.
And page 17.
This is a voice transaction that's taking place at 5:12 p.m. So this would be for a call.
All right, and still in the tower that covers her in-laws' home.
Yes.
And the next frame.
This is another NELOS data point for 5:16 p.m.
Right, and is that the last transaction that occurs on that date on June 3rd?
For this area, yes.
I mean, relative to the in-laws location. Is this the last?
Yes, it is.
Event? Okay, so that last point, we don't know from the data that she left at 5:33. Is that correct? That's the last time of this recorded activity, but that's an imprecise measure.
That is correct. So we don't know how much time that data and exactly what time it was that the data transaction used each of these other towers. We only know which tower it started at that time and which tower it ended at and what that time is.
Okay, but what we do know is that the first recorded activity on that day is at 3:47. And then the last recorded activity with respect to that particular location is at 5:33. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Of the 25 potential visits that you identified, were there many that were relatively in that same time frame, potentially an hour or two visit?
There were all sorts of different timeframes. Some that were, more of a lengthy period of time. Others that were shorter. At least the data points that existed were much fewer.
Okay. And let's refer back again to 323. And Mr. Breton, I want you to make sure, actually, let's go to 322. That one I think was completely redacted. In Exhibit 322, the first several pages, there are 13 pages in total, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the first, looks like the first 6 pages show telephone calls. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And then the remaining pages are the ones that reflect the text messages that went back and forth.
That is correct.
And there, I noticed that there's some color coding here, some orange and some yellow. What do those colors signify?
So everything in yellow is going to be a transaction that originates from Nancy Brophy's phone.
Okay, so whether it's a call or it's a text, if we see it in yellow, that means that it originated with her.
Correct.
And then the orange, I take it that means that those are ones that originated with Karen Brophy.
Yes.
Right. Now, there are, as you had noted, many texts and telephone calls in this period. And I think that date range that I gave you, June 2nd of 2018 to September 5th of 2018, I believe that that's 88 days. We've got more calls and more text messages than that. In this, did you find, I know you gave us the totals. You said that there was over 10 hours of conversation. Is that
Yes.
correct? And then on top of that, there were what appear to be over 200 text messages back and forth.
I believe 184 texts back and forth.
Look, oh, I was adding the calls and the text. I'm sorry, you're right. 107 and 77 would be 184. Right. Are there a number of calls that are quite lengthy, 22 minutes or more?
There were.
So there were some very short calls that might have been voicemails, but there were other much more substantial calls.
Yes, enough to get over 10 hours, I believe 10 minutes and a few seconds.
All right. And was there actually at least one call that was over 40 minutes?
I believe there was.
All right. Nothing further. Thank you. And I think the state does have a few more questions for you if it's all right with the court.
Okay.
I don't think we have any other questions. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Roloff, thank you. You can disconnect.
Thank you.
And I guess I will ask defense whether or not it makes sense to start with another witness. We would be ending at about 4:45 if we do.
We won't be done with her, Your Honor. Because she struggled to do what Mr. Roloff did a little bit easier, and maybe is she living somewhere in the box?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
All right. Could we start tomorrow with her? She's
Sure, we're talking about a WebEx victim.
Yeah.
Sorry, victim. A WebEx
exactly.
a witness.
Yes, we are.
What I would suggest is if at least if the defense can get here a little early to try to
get her
set up
started
the.
early.
Yes.
That's a good
All
idea.
right. So, let me be clear about what I've just said because I'm confusing myself. We're going to end for today. We are not going to be here tomorrow. So this will be on Monday that we are resuming. So with that, we will break.
Okay, we'll go off record.